Hello, welcome to this How Do I video on how to create a new application service in Microsoft Dynamics NAV Management Portal. In this video, you will see how to create a new application service and learn about its types, parameters, and available actions. We will get there by going through these three simple steps. Step 1, I will explain the concept of the compatibility level. Step 2, I will explain how to create a new application service and define all of its parameters. Step 3, I will explain which additional actions you can perform on an application service. Let's get started. Before we start creating our first application service, let's touch upon a very important concept used in the management service called compatibility level. If you navigate to the list of platforms which Microsoft makes available inside of the management portal, you can see that each platform has a compatibility level defined for it. At the same time, the applications which you upload, they also have compatibility level defined for them on application version. The compatibility level is filled in automatically when you upload the new application into the management portal. You can look up this value for your on-prem databases as well. To do that, simply open the SQL Server Management Studio, locate your database, find the DB property table, and select the top 1000 rows. The compatibility level is defined in the database version number field. We use the compatibility level to understand which applications can run with which platforms. Now, keeping this important concept in mind, let's try and create our first application service. To do that, navigate to the Application Services menu and click New. Now you can select which application you want to use to create this application service. In this case, I would like to use my Fabric and Fashion Accessories application, so I'm going to pick that. Now I'm presented with the list of application versions which I uploaded for this application. So I'm going to select the Cumulative Update 2. Here I have my application service created in draft mode. Notice that the platform is picked up automatically based on the compatibility level of my application version. If I look up the list of the platforms, this list will be limited to those platforms which have the same compatibility level as my application version. Next step, I'm going to provide the name for my first application service. Now when the name is defined, I can also choose the type of the application service. You can select from two types, production and sandbox. Use production type when you expect to have production tenants running in this service. If you are creating the application service for test or troubleshooting purposes, choose the sandbox type. Next, I can select the location, the Azure data center where my application service will be running. Here I have access to all available Azure locations, so I can pick the one which suits me best. Next, you can define the authentication type to be used by the tenants of your application service. You can choose between username and password authentication and Office 365 authentication. Let's move on to the next step to define the scaling parameters of the application service. On this tab, you can choose what is your scale unit. Scale units are measured in cores. You can pick between 1, 2, 4, and 8 cores scale units. Once you've defined that, you can also select how many of the scale units you want to create for this service. For the production services, you must have minimum 2 scale units running. When you select 2 or more scale units, they are automatically configured as a load balanced set when you provision the application service. Let's move on to the next tab, where you can define your domain settings. On this tab, you can choose whether you want to use a self-signed SSL certificate or you would like to upload your own SSL certificate. For the production services, we strongly recommend you to use your own purchased SSL certificate. If you're creating an application service for test or troubleshooting, you can leave the check mark in a self-signed SSL certificate and we'll generate one for you. In this case, I would like to use my custom domain. So I'm going to put a check mark in the custom domain field. And now I will upload my SSL certificate. When certificate is uploaded, I need to define the password for this certificate. Now when the password is defined, I can see my custom domain name in the domain field. I can also see the SSL certificate expiration date, so I can track expiration of this certificate on the service. On the next tab, you can specify whether you want to open SOAP or OData web services for this application service. You have now completed configuring the application service, so you can go to the Actions menu and click Provision. Now the status of the service is changing to Provisioning. You can close the page and come back to it later when the status changes to Running. The application service is now provisioned. You can see that its status has now changed to Running. Let's go back to the application service card and take a look at which actions are available for it. Naturally, you can go ahead and start adding tenants. You can either do it from the tenant list by clicking New Action, or you can use a shortcut action, Add Tenants, to start creating a new tenant immediately. We will cover the process of working with tenants in a separate video. You can also scale your application service by adding or removing scale units. Simply specify the desired number of scale units and click OK to kick off the scaling. The log will show all the operations that you performed on this application service. If you want to create a quick copy of your application service, use the copy action. For instance, if you want to create a sandbox application service with exactly the same settings to troubleshoot your application or maybe to test your upgrade scenario, simply click Copy and the program will create a copy of your application service with a new name. You can then change the type from production to sandbox. Notice that the number of scale units automatically changes to 1 and click Provision. Your sandbox service will start provisioning with exactly the same settings as your production application service. Use the welcome email setup page to define the template to be used to send welcome emails to your tenants. You can either use text format and embed predefined placeholders into it, or you can use rich HTML formatting to design beautifully looking welcome emails. you enable HTML format by setting the check mark in Format as HTML field. Here are a couple of examples of how the welcome emails could look like. Here is a welcome email which is sent to the tenants using Office 365 authentication. And here's an example of welcome email sent to the users which use username and password authentication. If you want to temporarily stop your application service, click on Stop Action and the portal will remove all scale units from this application service. Please note that at this point, none of your tenants will be able to connect to the service. Once the service is stopped, this action changes to Start, so you could start it again at any point. If you no longer need the application service, simply click Deprovision and the program will remove the application service completely. Please also note that before you can deprovision an application service, you need to remove all tenants defined for it. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.